We are in the middle of page Chavtes. The line starts with the word HaKoiches. We actually started on this Indian, but we will start there again. So we concluded the discussion of the emtsoi element of Chochmah. Where Chochmah is necessary in order to bring the nefesh and the oineg of the nefesh into all the functioning koiches. But even though it is in fact the nefesh itself that comes into comes into the koiches, and that is the essence of the oineg. But in order to make that connection, and as we explained, the connection it's not just a linkage, it is a transition. In order to bring the nefesh closer to the koiches so that the nefesh can actually relate, they can relate the chayas and the oineg of the nefesh to the koiches, there has to be this intermediacy of Chochmah. Chochmah is capable of relating to the atzmius of the nefesh and the koiches hakifim of the nefesh, and then bringing it down and translating it into a pnimi level from which all the koiches emanate. And thus all the koiches receive the oineg of the nefesh directly from the nefesh. And as we concluded, that the truth is, it is not incorrect to say that the nefesh itself is misaneg, experiences the koiches, even though there is an enormous distance and gap and difference between the oineg of the nefesh and the oineg in the koiches. Now we are introduced to a new level in all that. Just as this is true in the nefesh hativi, what we call the natural nefesh, kahu, similarly it is ba'oineg ha'eleki, in the oineg eleki, in the godly oineg, haruchni, the spiritual one, b'neshama ha'elekis, in the nefesh ha'elekis, in the godly neshama, shemisaneges, but the neshama is participant and misaneg, and it is experiencing the delight, behadalet chushim shebo, in the four chushim, four senses. The four senses are, as you all know, sight, hearing, taste, and smell. The four chushim in the nefesh ha'elekis, ba'avedas havaya, in the activity and the experience of Avedas Hashem. So here we stop. We attempted to get us focused. What nefesh we are referring to? What aspect? And what is it? What is this this description. Oyneg holaki horuchni. We did not perceive that oyneg, the oyneg hanefesh and the chayes are gashmi. I would say oyneg holaki horuchni. So in order to get into this and to get a glimpse of what is meant by Oyneg Holaki Horuchni, B'Neshama Holakis, which means that relative to what we've discussed so far, this is Ruchni and that is Gashmi. How do we approach this?
I just ask a quick question, which maybe is in line with the direction you go. This whole idea that we said that Chachma is a Kli with Gilei Eres Atzmi, that was referring strictly to the Nefesh Tigis. That was not an allusion.
Look what he's saying.
I mean, I know.
All right, so leave it alone. As it is in Nefesh HaTivi, the same is it in Oyneg Holaki Horuchni Rishon. Once we go through this thing, this is not going to help. To understand what he's saying, then we'll get... Clearly, we're talking about the Ruchni all the time. All of a sudden it says Nefesh Holaki Horuchni. We have to... Okay. Understand. We're not going to understand on our own. We're going to understand on the basis of what the Rebbe is telling us. Let's focus on what the Rebbe is telling us. And that way, we will be able to understand. So the Rebbe says, the way it is in Nefesh HaTivi, the similar way it is in the Nefesh Holaki Horuchni. In Oyneg Holaki Horuchni, B'Neshama Holakis. So the first thing that we need to identify over here is the term Nefesh HaTivi. What is Nefesh HaTivi? I think somebody has not muted the phone, but I'd appreciate if you did. Nefesh HaTivi. What is Teva? So we speak about it all the time. Teva essentially is the interrelationship on the basis of cause and effect. One affects the other, one pushes the other. That's Teva. I don't think we need to elaborate on it, but so that we get into this and understand it. How does a car move? A car does not move. A car does not in any which way relate to the concept of movement. There's an engine. And what is an engine consist in? An engine consists in some kind of an explosion that gives out a force. That force pushes a lever. That lever pushes yet another lever. Until this, thank you very much, until this translates and affects a wheel in the car, and the wheel begins to turn. Somebody has not muted the phone. We'd really appreciate you to do that. Hello? The wheel, as it turns, and the wheel is on the ground, the ground doesn't let it turn, because the ground there's the friction and the cause that the wheel turns against the ground, and therefore that pushes the car frontward or backward, and that's how the car moves. The whole thing, the whole phenomenon of the car moving can all be, so to speak, analyzed and downgraded to one force working against another force. The result of it is movement. There is not an element of movement in the car. Where is the element of movement? The element of movement is in the human perception. The whole concept is a human concept. In the car itself, there is not that spirit of movement. This is way out. It cannot even become translated. You can't even explain it to the car. The car does not know what it's doing. And will never know if it covers 100 miles or 1,000 miles. Now, this is generally speaking Teva. Now we're saying that there is a nefesh hativi, which means that in the nefesh that we were speaking of till now, the nefesh that's mislabesh in the koiches ha-nefesh, in the koiches, which ultimately are mislabesh in the guf. And we said, what koiches are we talking about? Koiches that actually can affect the body. Walking, talking, moving. And all the koiches, all the variations of koiches that we have, all that comes from the nefesh. And we're saying that there is an element that this nefesh, even though it actually gives chayus, real life to the group, there's an element of TV in that whole process. Having, so to speak, identified TV at the lowest level, but in any case identified the principle of TV. What would be the contrast of TV? TV means something is pushing it, is causing it to react in a certain way. The contrast of TV would be there is nothing pushing it. Nothing is forcing it. It's expressing an inherent truth of its own. So as I mentioned, actually we started this on this. So let us examine the TV element in the TV element in a broader spectrum. This world in general is called a natural world. And in that there are four categories. There is a doimim, there is a meach, and there is a chay, and there is a medaber. The doimim, as we explained in the example of the car, is entirely TV. Do you see any kind of activity, any kind of reaction and movement it's entirely TV? In other words, it was forced to happen by some other external force. It itself is not even aware what it's accomplishing. in a certain, in a very great similarity, is a tzemeach, even though tzemeach has an element of life. The tzemeach actually is connected to the ground, and it draws sustenance from the ground. So there is an element that is actually taking place, a life element. But there too, there is essentially, it's a TV process, natural process. Then there is the chai, the living. The living, there is already going into different category. If you take movement, you say on the most natural level, on the doimim and tzemeach level, if it moves not on its own. It does not even aware that it's moving. It moves because you give it a push, and the koyach of the push is what causes it to move. It's not at all on its own aware of its movement. To put it even more emphatically, to the stone, it does not make any difference whether it's sitting here or it's sitting here. So when you push the stone and it moves from here to here, nothing happened to the stone. It moved because it was moved. Then you come to the chai. The chai, even though it is alive, but its entire spectrum of living, its entire activity, sphere of activity, is all in a natural level. What does it mean? If the chai is drawn to food, it is drawn to food because it is drawn to it. It's being, something is drawing it. If the chai, if you give the dog a hit in the head, and the dog runs away, it is because it feels the pain of the hit, and it runs away. So there's also a natural interaction, but there is already a great difference, and the difference can be identified on two levels. Number one, the dog wants to be here because the food is over here. When you hit it on the head, it runs away, but it still wants to be here. In other words, there's a reason why it was here, from its perspective. A natural reason, but there is a reason. When you hit it, it runs away because it was hit, not because it realizes it doesn't belong here. It still wants to be here, but it runs away. It was hit. But even there, in the hit, there is a big difference between hitting a stone and hitting a dog. The stone does not move because it feels the hit, and it realizes, oh, you don't want me to be here, I should be here. It doesn't have that. The dog has an element of that, because it actually feels the pain internally. And to avoid the further pain, it goes away. So even though there is a direct cause, what do you mean by a direct cause? It is not that the dog realizes that he doesn't belong here. Doesn't realize that element at all. He doesn't belong here. He shouldn't be. It simply is pushed away from this place. But it's pushed away by the place not by force of the push, but by a good hint. You better go. So here we have a kind of a combination, a transitional state. On the one hand, it is natural because there is a cause, a direct cause, and there is not a realization element that makes the dog move. There's an actual cause, but that cause is first being processed by the dog. It feels the pain. It's not the force like in the rock that the movement is caused by the force of movement. So this is already a notch above the basic natural state. Then we come to the prince, to the king, to the human being, the Medaber. And you would think the Medaber is above the whole inner of nature. He's got intelligence. And the Medaber, if he should move, if you come to a place and say, hey, sir, this is my place, and he moves away, the whole concept of this movement is actually processed and fully comprehended by the person who's moving. It's not being pushed. It is something which you could say you almost initiated internally. There's a what we call a truth element. Sorry. And therefore we say that the Medaber, the human being, he is not bound by nature. That's what intelligence is. He knows what he is doing. So for this we're saying, he knows what he's doing. This phenomenon, he knows what he is doing, is actually the summary of what we learned till now. That is an element of nefesh, of chayus, of oineg, in every human activity. Oineg means that he has a personal relationship, a feeling, a sense of what he's doing. It's transmitted from the nefesh into the goof via the intellectual process. Chokhmah primarily.
So what's the key that makes it tivy? He fully understands.
Wait, I didn't come to that.
Okay.
And here is where we have to understand, and this understanding will lead us to see a completely different arena, a different realm. That even in this intellectual human process, even though there is a nefesh element and there's an oineg nefesh, there is a natural cause undertone involved. If a person comes and says, excuse me, this is my place, and you move away, on the lowest level, you could say, oh, I don't want to create any kind of arguments. I don't want to have the unpleasantness of argument and so forth. I'll move away. That clearly is a natural result. There's not an element of neshama, nefesh, truth in it. It is a circumstantial reaction. Except the reaction is caused by your intellect and understanding, preventing any kind of consequences. But it's a reaction to a situation.
You wouldn't say that there's truth in it. Does not, that the idea of not having machlokes or not having arguments is a certain.
It's a reaction to a certain circumstance.
The fact that he wants that, though, in other words, that that's what he wants, to be free of that. That's an inherent kind of the fact that he likes that rather than to be constantly involved.
How is this, in absolute terms, different than not wanting to get hit?
Not wanting to get hit is an need of self-preservation, but wanting shalom is like it's a human thing. That there's an inherent value in peace, beyond just that I would get hurt, but that it's unhuman, it's unbecoming of a human being to be involved in physical altercation.
Wait a second. This is taking it out of the nefesh hativis. On the teva level, that he wants to bring shalom into the world is not a teva thing. That's not a teva thing. This is not the nefesh hativis. This is not the natural quest of a human being. This thing that he wants to bring peace, this is coming from outside of the world.
To be free from disturbances.
And what you were saying, yes, because we're constantly learning that we have a nefesh hativis and we have to bring Elokus into the world. That is our purpose. So you can see it from a completely different perspective. That does not have a presence in the world at all. I'm talking about the human being as part of the four structures, the four levels of Doimit Shemei Chayim Medaber. Medaber is also this is also part of a natural world, except of course it's natural with the intellectual input, just like a Chai is natural. But there's a big difference between how the Chai reacts and how the stone reacts. So, but the human being, there is already an inherent element of this nature. I'm moving away because I don't want to have the disturbance and the conflagration, the confrontation. There is still the action and the reaction. It's still an avoidance of consequence. Even if one comes into, let's say, in a shul, and it's a Pakbis Medrash, and he is new over here, he will ask around, you show me where is an empty seat where people, where nobody normally is sitting there. Why does he do that? Naturally, because he doesn't want to create any disturbance. So even by the human being, I mean, this is so real and so basic that the psychologists and those who study, so to speak, the human being from a natural perspective, they say that's all there is. That's all there is. There is not the truth that you point out that we are learning about. There isn't. A human being, with all his finesse, is actually looking out for himself. We don't subscribe to it. We say that there is a higher level. I mean, we say even in nature there's a higher level than what they say. Nevertheless, it's still in the category of natural, which means there's a cause, there's a present cause, there's an identifiable cause. And in this natural process, we are saying that in each one of these activity levels, there is a nefesh element, there's an oineg that's drawn from the nefesh. And that is what facilitates this whole activity.
So it's what?
That enables this whole activity. And now we have reached our natural limit, and we will have to delay it till tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. At least we already started, but just now we have kind of review of this. Okay, have a good day. And we will go to the Nefesh Elokis tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. Have a good day.
So even in the natural, there's the element of oineg, which is oineg is already above. Oineg is not a natural thing. Oineg means a connection to the entire reality. So it seems almost a little bit like a miraculous thing.
So we should ask this question tomorrow.
Okay.
Do 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 do.